Oh, I didn't plug out my Ethernet.
Oh, we should also make sure comments are turned off on YouTube or like chat. Are we also streaming this on YouTube at the same time?
Probably mute us. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CG Cookie live stream. My name is Kent Trammell, and I also have Jonathan Lampel with me. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing very good, thank you. Today we are together going to address the rest of the critiques that were submitted, the rest of the artwork that was submitted last week. There were so many we split it in half, and it still lasted 2 hours last week. Probably similar. It will last about 2 hours today as well. But yeah, this is a free stream, and in case you're here for the first time and you've never heard of this before, we primarily teach. We're a company that teaches through online pre-recorded videos and courses, but we have the live stream to cover some things that don't really fit in the pre-recorded format. We have conversations, we do critiques, we hold these things called classes, which are like sequential weekly things that have report cards and homework and all that stuff. But so yeah, it's a different type of format for communicating with our community primarily. So we're pretty good about a weekly stream, about once a week, but sometimes more, sometimes less. But that's what we're about. And so today we wanted to invite everyone else to join in the critiques. And there were several free people, like people who are not paying members, that submitted, and they're going to get critiqued today, along with some members. So with that said, we will get started. And also, if you're in the chat for the first time on our site, cgcookie.com, I think I turned the chat off for the YouTube side. You can ask questions by typing brackets, like the square brackets, and a capital Q in between the brackets. That will add a question tag. That makes it easy for us to see questions. Feel free to ask them as you have them, especially if you're getting critiqued and you want clarification on anything that we say. Please use that. And with that said, now we can get started. So the first one we are looking at is a dragonfly type creature by IY Land Muncie. IY Land Muncie is the best I could come up with for that. So the description that you provided, pretty happy with this one. So would love any feedback on how to improve it, from mesh to lighting, materials, or anything else. The idea behind it is to blend the shapes of a mythical fantasy Western type dragon and the dragonfly insect. All right.
It's a fun idea.
Yeah, I like it. And I think you certainly nailed that goal. I feel like this is exactly what you described. So, I mean, congrats for achieving that. You also provided another render, a bigger render close up on the face, so we get to see texture detail. And yeah, I mean, great job. I mean, it's certainly something worth being proud of, I think. So it's unique. I've not seen anything quite like this before. Good job. Now, as far as the critique notes, I grabbed an image of a dragonfly, since you referenced that, and kind of put it beside, so we can kind of take a look and get some info from that. Now, I think a general note is a broader range of color values in your render, because especially the brights being brighter, I think that there's a lot of room for the bright values to feel brighter. Right now there's like a dim sort of feeling, and I know in Blender 2.8, if that's what you happen to be using to render, there's the Filmic default color space uses like what's it called, Lampel? Like you can change the it's like baseline or high contrast, medium contrast. What's that setting called? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, just the look that's applied to it.
The look, that's right. Okay, so the default look is set to none, I believe, and I have found that makes it kind of this dim sort of color. So I'm taking a guess that maybe that you're using the default 2.8 render color space, and I would change that to like a medium contrast, I believe is the one that I use. But anyway, so
can I jump in on that?
Yeah,
one?
Go for it.
Instead of doing that, try first, like the at least first approach would be to crank up the lights themselves, because it's supposed to mimic like what a real world camera would be ish, and so I think it's the lights themselves being too dim, not the actual like look contrast that's applied afterwards.
It's not been my experience. In my experience, I've never been able to get the lights to like get towards a value of 1. But so I have,
sure.
Yeah, and the more I've talked about it with people, like the baseline of none, I think is questionable. But anyway, well, that's somewhere that you can change it. You can try increasing the lights, but Filmic is being used regardless of the look. So Filmic is what the physical accuracy is the baseline, the foundation of it. But anyway, like, would you agree as a whether however you do it technically that the value range is lacking in the image?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. The also the presence of plain materials. So for example, on the wings is I think a great opportunity to mimic the high fidelity detail that we see in the dragonfly image. So this great kind of crackled, it looks like sort of a Voronoi tiled pattern in the wing, like that would be great, I think, on your creature, at least something to that effect, because right now the plain white color is kind of odd, I guess, for a final rendered image. There's not a lot of pure plain colors out there in reality. So I would recommend trying to go for that sort of detail. There's also some pieces. Let me go back a step, back a slide. So you've got this nice texture detail on the like main body portions, the black and kind of red, but then you've got other pieces that are completely plain gray. And I would just recommend like finishing off everything and adding texture quality to all your pieces, at least to be consistent. That kind of feels unfinished to me. And another thing that I think would fit, now it depends on what you meant for scale. I'm guessing that this is a similar scale to like a real dragonfly, meaning pretty small, because you have like a branch in there. If it is going to be that small, just like we see in the photograph, I would recommend stronger depth of field to hit that effect home, because the smaller an object is and a camera focuses on that small object, you're going to get more depth of field. And I think that would add a lot. You can see that the background is blurred out in your render, but nothing in the actual 3D geometry is not blurred out at all. So even on a small object like this, it would be great to see depth of field like we do in the photo. The tree branch, it looks like you used the Shader Forge lesson about creating a procedural wood material on that branch, which, I mean, kudos for trying that. That's a pretty complex material, and still, maybe you didn't do that, but it looks like that. But the problem is that's like inside of a tree trunk, like there's no bark. It's the interior mass of wood, whereas it doesn't fit for like a tree branch because that involves bark, which is a totally different part of the wood. So that being said, I would like to see a more tree barkish branch type material on the branch itself. And then I think a bonus, looking at the photograph, there's all these wonderful little hairs all on the dragonfly. And it'd be cool if you carried that over to certain parts of your creature. This is just suggestion, not, it's not a critique per se, but I think that can add nice detail to the overall creature. But yeah, so those are my notes. Lampel, do you have any notes?
Yeah, I think the first thing that hit me is that it feels kind of like stiff and artificial. So like the modeling itself is a really cool shape, but for one, the pose just makes it feel very not alive, I guess. Whereas the dragonfly itself has all sorts of like bends, even in the back of its tail and stuff, and in its legs.
That's a good point.
So it feels less like a flying creature and more like a walking creature, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That is just very stiff.
Yeah.
But other than that, in terms of like design, I think the wings could be made larger. Do you think that would look more natural?
That's I mean, comparing it to the dragonfly, I guess they do seem much bigger. Like they span a wider distance, I guess it seems to on the dragonfly.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah.
mean it's hard to say because like dragons, like you'll see dragons, like large bodies and tiny wings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like a stylistic thing. I don't know.
True. Doesn't seem to make aerodynamic sense.
Yeah.
And I think that it took me a while when you were talking about the wings that there must be 4 wings. There's another set on the other side, but they're kind of hidden in silhouette. So like it could help, I think, to maybe pose those differently so that they are clearly visible as wings. And I don't know, that could help maybe make them feel a little bit broader.
That's true. And maybe pose them, like you'll notice in the photo that they're like dragonfly wings don't flap like up and down as much. Otherwise they just like smash into each other. They kind of like have like a weird rolling ish motion to it.
Right.
So you could try to like mimic that in at least the way that they're like tilted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and maybe remove the claws on the back one.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, just like lots of like little things like that. Just thinking about how it moves would probably help.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. The On your point about it being feeling stiff, looking at the leg joints, there's not a clear indication of how they bend, but if it's leaning towards any direction, it's like they would bend outward, kind of opposite of what I would expect. Um, so yeah, I think that lends itself to the stiff sort of feeling you were talking about.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, but I think it's such a like it's a fun idea. Just the name of it, like it has to be made. I can't believe I haven't seen one before.
Awesome. Omar, I see that there's some nice words from Zarian Tasuna. Thank you, Zarian. I appreciate that. We appreciate that. Certainly. So thank you. And all right, on to the next one. Oh yeah, the audio interface by Nis Wegman. Nis Wegman. You want to take that one away?
Yeah. Yeah, he says, "Hi, I'm learning to model user interfaces for audio plugins for music production. For this one, I've used Moi 3D, Blender 2.8, and Affinity Photo. I'd love to hear some critiques on how I can get feedback and how to improve it." That's a really cool project. I've never worked with audio software, so I don't know how this interface actually like works with it. But it seems to be a pretty popular thing to take like very realistic interfaces and use that in that software, um, which is interesting. I think that's pretty cool, and I think you've done like a really good job with this. It definitely took me some time of looking at it in order to spot like anything wrong with it. Like I really don't see too much that jumps out at me as like incorrect. Like you've done so many little things, like making sure all the screws are twisted in different directions and like highlighting the edges in just the right way. Like there's even smudges around the dials where somebody would like grab it and then like turn the knob where their like fingers brush against it and leave like oils and stuff. Like that's in the render. So you've definitely gone the extra mile already. Um, so I had a pretty hard time figuring out what to do in addition to that. One nitpick that I saw that honestly I don't even know whether it's a genuine complaint or not. Kent, you'd have to verify this for me. But on the meters on the left, it looks like there's a shadow all around them when it's not like up, popped out from the surface. So it kind of looks like they're hovering. Um,
Interesting. Yeah, I see
do you see
that.
that?
It kind of
Okay.
feels like if I were to do that effect in like Photoshop or Krita with like a shadow layer effect, layer style. That's
Hmm.
kind of what it feels like to me. It doesn't. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't feel like photorealistic rendered.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe turning down that shadow a bit and making it much, much smaller would probably help. But beyond that, Kent had some examples of somebody who also rendered these out and put a lot of like little like fine grained details on stuff.
Mhm.
And that's mostly just like bump noise, it seemed like. So maybe
Yeah.
just a tiny, tiny, tiny subtle amount of that could go a long way in just pushing it that extra little bit. Can you pull up that?
Yes, I'm looking at him now. It's this artist Luis Berdalo. I would imagine the artist who's the artist that we're talking about, Nis Wegman. I would hope you have heard of this person because his work is incredible. But yeah, like this kind of the only looking at your image, I was like Lampel, kind of at a loss for like this is really really good. So how can I nitpick? What is possibly there for me to pick apart? And the only real thing that I could come up with after being familiar with this artist was just like all surfaces are like microscopically detailed, almost like micro fine detail involved in the surfaces, even if it's a noise pattern that you wouldn't notice typically, but because we're so zoomed into these buttons, to add that kind of detail. Now it's not that you're lacking that kind of detail at all. You can just look at the screws, for example, and they have different values of the roughness, like different color variation. They're turned different ways. So like you are clearly very mindful of detail and making it unique. And also like you can subtly see around the dials that there's like a discoloration that to me represents the finger oils being rubbed off as you turn the knobs, and it changes the color over time. It's really really cool details. But if you are going up a notch, I feel like adding this sort of detail to the surface if it's appropriate, depending on your paint style in the audiovisual device or whatever. That's the only real thing I could see that I would interpret as a level up. But I mean, still, I'm trying to think of something to nitpick you on. This is really, really good work. Yeah, so good job. Have you ever heard of Moy 3D, Lampel?
I've heard of it. Somebody has used it that I watched a video on at some point. I've never used it myself.
Moy 3D is a
Let's look it up.
modeling. I'm looking it up right now. It's a 3D modeling CAD application for designers and artists. Interesting.
Oh, okay. So CAD stuff.
Holy cow! It has this like 1990s style website. It must be pretty niche, I feel like. But anyway, does good work. Obviously.
Oh, nice.
Cool. So yeah, good job, Nice. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Nice. Oh, you're here. Awesome. Yeah, okay, you are familiar with Berdalo's work. Fantastic. That's great.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Hope that was helpful. If you need any clarification, let me know. Awesome. And all right, so we'll go on to the next one then. Moy 3D is a CAD modeler. That's good to know. I think the stream's probably 30 seconds behind again. I forgot to change that setting. Oh, Master Xeon talks about Moy.
That's who it was.
That's
okay.
a good endorsement. Oh, you're right. I watched that stream and now I remember. Yeah, I remember him talking about it. Okay. Make stuff for AAA movies. Anyway, all right. On to the next. So we're looking at... Wait, this is not the right name. I'm sorry. I got the name wrong on the... underneath the tie. So this is just a pair of sculpts from Quentin Stinky? Stinky? I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it's not coming out well. Let me read your description. I'm trying to go for realism, and I've studied anatomy for a while now, and I'm getting to the point where I'm not sure what I need to improve on, even though I know something is off. Thanks for doing critique sessions. It's really helpful. I have two sculpts, but you can use whichever one you think is best for critiquing. I think I used both of them, obviously. But Quentin, thank you for submitting. And I have to agree that it looks evident. It appears evident to me that you have been studying anatomy for a while, and you're executing it quite well. And so, yeah, I mean, hats off to you. Human anatomy is a big a goal to achieve. Certainly, every human's experts, whether they're artists or not, in when anatomy looks good or when it looks bad. So kudos for taking the challenge on and getting this far. Like this is very good work. To your point, you can tell that something is off, and I mean I can feel that a little bit. So I want to offer some notes as far as some things that I see. But you should be encouraged. I mean this as an encouragement that if I were to rank you in anatomy, I think you're like a 9 out of 10. I think you're really, really close to being like completely reliable, trustworthy, like anatomy creator, anatomy recreator kind of thing. So with that in mind, I you only have that little bit left, in my opinion. So let's go over some notes. Again, 9 out of 10 in my opinion. So for the torso sculpture, I feel that the neck is proportionally a little too skinny, and given that the torso is fairly muscular, I think that if there was a head on top of that torso, it would be pretty clear that the neck is too skinny. So I would recommend broadening that, giving it a little bit more mass, and then the collarbone area on both sculptures for the bust and the torso, to me, just needs a little bit more refinement. You've got these structures in place, but it's not quite right next to a photograph, for example. And I wanted the name for this part, but at the bottom of this triangle, this triangular portion where you have the Adam's apple at the top, and then it comes down into this triangle right above the collarbone, that I believe is called the anterior cervical triangle. That needs to be pushed in a little bit more. There needs to be more depth, as I think is clear in the photograph, but in your renders there, it kind of flattens out a little too early. So I would recommend being mindful of that kind of detail. You have the structures there, which is great, but just pushing it and refining it a little bit more, especially this complex area like the collarbone is definitely certainly weird. But yeah, refine that a little bit more. And then there's a ridge between the pectorals. Let me go back a slide. On your bust, there's this kind of, I think it's just like an oversight. There's a ridge that seems to, in the pectorals, it goes down, the divot between the pecs, but then in yours, it seems to jut back out in this kind of ridge. I think it's probably just a simple oversight because you don't have it in your other sculpt. But it was just something that I happened to notice. And then the abs. So to me, in your torso sculpture, the abdominals feel a little stuck on. They don't feel quite incorporated into the anatomy. They feel like, I describe it as if you've seen people wear like Halloween costumes of superheroes, especially kids, and they like have muscles sewn into the costume. Like it kind of gives me that sort of feel. And I think the way that I can break it down is the abdominals feel very bulky and super ripped, whereas the rest of the body doesn't feel quite as bulky or quite as ripped. And so it's out of place. And I have two photos there. The one on the left is a crazy ripped dude. And so the abs are like that. But you can see that same level of detail kind of spread out to encompass the entire body. So like the, I don't know exactly what the crease is called, but where the abs end and it cuts down towards the crotch like that should be cut a lot more in yours to continue that level of rippedness and muscle definition elsewhere. I'd like to see more rib cage definition as well. Or I think to be maybe more accurate would be tone down your abs so that it incorporates with the rest of the anatomy. Because let me go back to this slide. Again, like if there was a scale, a number scale out of 5, I would put this guy at like 3.5 or 4 maybe in terms of musculature and bulk and definition. But then the abs are like at a 5. And so I would tone the abs back down to a 3.5 or 4. And that's the second photo, I think, to like reducing some of the cuts and volume, I think would help. But yeah, I mean, that all of that, again, just to try and take you from like a 9 to a 10. I think you're really, really close. And did you ask for anything else? No, I don't think so. Cool. All right. So that was it. Do you have any notes, Lampel?
I really have very few anatomy notes just because I don't know it as well. Mm-hmm. But there is 2 things. I guess one note on the abs is whichever way you decide to go, whether it's like really bulking up everything else or toning it down, the muscles on like the side, like right down through here, should match either way. Whereas in this one you have like the front abs, but like what's to the side of it, I can't think of the name right off the top of my head, but the side muscles.
I'm not good with the anatomy terms.
Should be the same.
Yeah.
In terms of like bulk and cut.
Right.
I should know that name though. But yeah, the other thing is there's a line in the like torso bust that goes like from the shoulders like cutting in, and it kind of makes him look like he has boobs. You know what I'm talking about?
I think I'm pointing it out. Yeah.
Is that natural? Because the muscle like flows this like outwards.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's just muscle.
That's a good point. We can find some. Let's see here. Oh, okay. I thought I misspelled it.
Obliques. Thank you, Jake.
Obliques. Yeah.
That's like the very side, but also that works too.
Right. I see what you're saying.
Smaller ones up here.
I don't know. Like I think it depends on the person. I think it is possible to have that sort of crease. And yeah, when I saw it, like it kind of stuck out to me. Yeah.
Part of it looks right, but then I had to think like, I'm not sure.
I feel like if the gap between, not the gap, but the divot between the pecs, if that was a little deeper, I feel like it would even that other cut out, in my opinion.
Gosh, those pictures are just unreal.
I know, right? Yeah. But I mean, overall, it's not a bad note. But I feel like that could be possible in anatomy. I feel like I've seen it before, but maybe toned down a little bit or evened out with the pec crease. But overall, I mean, yeah, good stuff from Quentin. Yeah, really good stuff.
Looks great.
Yeah. All right, now this woodland scene from Philip Capone.
Yes. Let me switch over to it. Okay, Philip says, this is my next woodland scene. I'm basing off the urban forest around home that's full of grass, um, but I like the green, lush feel. I'm trying a couple different camera positions for this time. I'm going for photorealism. I spent many hours working on it, but am about ready to set it aside and work on something else. I'd like your thoughts about what is the weakest part of the image and what elements I could get the most improvement on. Sure. So my notes for this one, first of all, is I like your lighting in general, where there's different like spots of light and shadow is really helpful because oftentimes these woodland scenes get very, very flat and everything kind of just mushes together. And that happens in real life too. If you just go out into the woods and take a picture of something with your phone, chances are it's not going to look very good at all because everything just smashes together. But I would recommend if you are not using one, using an HDRI and getting a little bit more color in just in the shadows and more variation in the different directions of the light. Because at the moment it doesn't seem like it's getting that I don't know, like variation of reflection from all of the different directions. Beyond that, I think that a lot of the leaves and foliage could use some glossiness, something to help them pop out a little bit or give them a reflection. Because you'll notice on the leaves on the front that are like closest to you, that you can see whether they're in light or in shadow, and there's some very like defined shadows there, which is totally good. But you can see that some of the leaves are curved, but you can't tell the curve from the light information. You can only tell it just because of the shape. And so that means that there needs to be a little bit more like gradation or something to give it a gradation as it curves, just to like fill out that form and give it shape and have it be just less flat. So giving it a little bit of glossiness will help, and giving different types of leaves different amounts of glossiness will help them stick out from each other. Because one other thing, if you, especially on the very last image, everything's about the same color and about the same roughness in terms of like the leaves, the grass, the bushes, the weeds. They're all about the same. So if you give them some, well, a couple different levels of variation. One is the different types of leaves should have different color and different roughness, but also within that, you can use like the object info node and plug in some randomness into each of the variations of those colors inside of those materials. So by varying those things up, I think that would help a lot. And yeah, I think that's about it. You could try doing more like real displacement for the trees, at least the ones very close. You don't need to do it for the ones farther away. But the ones that are close up, you could try doing like adaptive subdivision or just giving it more subdivision and really like bringing that bark out, because right now it does seem like very, very smooth and kind of just like average bump map, but it doesn't feel like coarse and rough and like popping out. But beyond that, I think, yeah, adding in the like HDRI, I think would really help. What do you think, Kent?
Yeah, I completely agree with your notes. The one that stuck out to me as soon as I like saw these sets of renders was the lack of glossy reflection, like you said. It does feel like it's almost entirely diffuse. I think there's a little bit on like the rock surface on the. I can notice it in the cliff side kind of render, but yeah, I think it would do wonders for the depth of the scene, for the believability of the scene, if it just had some reflection happening. And I mean, yeah, with that said, like the level of foliage that you've created, I think is really impressive. This reads like a real forest to me. I don't feel like there should be more foliage, which is often a note I see or I feel when I see forest renders is like, now there needs to be more vegetation and stuff like that. But in my opinion, I think you've hit a really good, believable level. But yeah, like just some glossy reflections, I think would do wonders.
Yeah, I think just with those couple things, this will be very, very convincing.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
you've done a good job.
Really good. Yeah. Who was this again? I forget. Philip Capone. Yeah. Keep up the good work, Philip. It's really good stuff. I wonder if Philip's here. Anyway, all right. So on to the next, McDonald's waitress, which I didn't know McDonald's had waitresses, but from Nuruddin Agbanoga. Nuruddin. So I will read your description. I made this project to practice sculpting, retopology, and texturing. For texturing human skin, I used a hand-painted mask and mix of RGB nodes and mixed shaders. I need advice on how to improve the materials for the skin, specifically. Okay, well, you did. I found out in your CG Cookie project that this came from some artwork, which I thought was really good. This is a really interesting looking character. I've not seen one like this too often. I really like the exaggerated proportions, the interesting facial shapes, the raised nose, the type of hair. Yeah, so I think this is a really cool character to turn into 3D. So good choice. Now, as far as some notes, I actually don't think I've commented on the skin shader specifically. So remind me to do that, Limpel. But notes that I had in general, like correlating your version to the artwork, because it is such a good piece of art, I would love for you to get a little closer if you were so inclined. So the face should be squashed to better match the art. Your face is a little bit longer, and I think that is a key characteristic of the character, having a shorter, rounder face. It's actually more of a square even, but like definitely not a long type face. I think it would really help a lot for there to be eyelashes. Right, without the eyelashes, if we go back one, you can't really tell where the iris ends, where the eye white begins, and then where the skin starts. It's just kind of all lost together in there. So I think breaking that up with some eyelashes would help a lot. It would also make her feel more human and more relatable, because it's kind of odd to not have eyelashes. And you can see them in the art. If I could zoom in, you could definitely see that they're hinted at. Certainly from the side, you can see it a little bit better. But anyway, I think smaller irises too. Like in the artwork, it's clearly a neutral character, and she's kind of like, I've just seen a ghost kind of expression. But within that, you can see the eye whites around the entire character, the entire iris. And so I would recommend scaling that down to match. The sharper curves in the art, like around the hips, you can see it like on the shoulders. There's a slight corner to the shoulders. The legs are straight. There's just an angularity to the character that I think is really interesting. Whereas in your version, everything kind of smooths out. So I think it'd be really cool if you could reincorporate those sharp edges into your version. And definitely let us know if you're here. Oh, you are here. Hello, Nuruddin. Welcome. And so yeah, try and get those sharper curves. I think it's just a really interesting part of the art, worth carrying over into the 3D version. And then I think there's this kind of error on the model of the upper arm. There's just this random kind of ridge. We can see it better, maybe not circled, ironically. But right here, I'm not sure what that is. I would imagine it's just an oversight kind of thing, but definitely it's kind of drawing my eye unnecessarily. And then the apron to me feels less like fabric and more like clay. Like it's just suction cup to the body and doesn't have a lot of fabric or folds that would indicate that this is an apron. So there's a lot of work I think that can be done there by referencing photographs of aprons and making it match conforming it to the different proportions of this character. I think that would help a lot if that felt more fabric-like. But as far as the skin shader, I didn't write notes about that specifically, but it depends on what type of skin you're going for. Right now, I don't get any indication of like subsurface scatter really. And it's hard with skin when it's such a consistent color. Right now, the only real difference in the skin that I see is the rosy red cheeks. And then the rest of the skin is just a solid color. Whereas, there's actually a lot of variation in a skin material, even for animated characters. Like it's definitely less for animated characters, but I would strongly encourage exploring skin variation from different parts of the body, not just the cheeks. So with that, coupled with some subsurface scatter, just a noticeable amount. There also needs to be a little bit of speck. Right now it's a flat type shader. I don't get a lot of dimension, just sort of like the last artwork we looked at, like specularity adds a lot of dimension and relatability to surfaces. So yeah, those were my notes. Yeah, so Lampel, do you have any?
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I really like the character, like you said. It's super unique and really fun. Um, it's been a while since I've been to McDonald's, but I don't think they had any waiters or waitresses there.
Maybe back in
So
the early days.
it's like a fun concept, like a very classy, you
Ooh,
know.
a classy McDonald's. That's an interesting
Yeah,
thought. Yeah.
like that's just a fun idea. But yeah, I think I had the same notes as you when it comes to like the clothes about it feeling like kind of like suctioned, especially around the neck
Mm,
and like collarbones
right.
ish. That does seem like it's like vacuumed on.
Totally. Yeah, even beyond
Um,
the apron. Yeah.
yeah, but also the rosy cheeks struck me as like a bit too much. Like in the artwork, they're like pretty subtle
Mm,
and kind of like fade out.
that's a good point.
And like the freckles aren't quite so dark. Like it almost seems in this artwork like it's like whiskers in a way,
Oh, yeah.
which is could be like a fun stylized thing.
Huh.
Um, but maybe making those like a little bit more subtle would be helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Um, and also, I don't know exactly what I would do with the hair, but it's pretty well defined in the artwork about like the shape of it,
Mhm.
um, how it just kind of like comes out and then kind of makes a similar shape to her waist in a way,
Oh, yeah.
kind of like mimics that. And I think that's part of the like
Design, for sure.
design, yeah, that what makes it kind of compelling. Um, so maybe he's like squaring that part up as well
Agreed.
and kind of defining those sections of hair a little bit more. I don't know. I'm not looking super close at the artwork, but is this hair or like geometry? I'd almost try just sculpting it with geometry
Mm,
and rendering it that way rather than messing with hair particles,
mm-hmm.
and maybe incorporating the little like ponytail and
Right.
have it like off to the side a little bit instead of directly behind so you can kind of see
Right.
what's going on.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I really like this character.
Yeah. I like this character a lot. Yeah. Speaking of the hair, like it's what's interesting in the render is like there's almost no shading information. Like it's almost completely eliminated somehow to like one solid color. But you can see that there are different
Right.
pieces in the geometry. I'm not sure what that means exactly. Like if there's a normals issue or if it's just such an overcast like type of HDR. But it strikes me as particularly odd that it's just pure color information almost.
Yeah, something about that.
But anyway, I think it's a good thought to sculpt the hair. I think that it would help the overall render if it matched the art a bit more. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's definitely a unique hairstyle. I like it. But anyway,
Also, I really like the idea of just like serving a burger. I think the fact that you added that in is really cool.
oh,
And I
true.
don't know which way I would go on this, but you can't see the logo on the hat, which is totally fine. Um, but whether or not that is like part of the point, depends on you.
hmm I think I copied the exact title, so I think it is called McDonald's Waitress officially. So to that point, you would definitely want to see the golden arches to hammer that home. I would agree.
Yeah, maybe just have a different pose or even like a different focal length or something.
Toples is wondering if you're wearing a wool beanie, Jonathan.
Yeah, I am.
It's colder in Seattle.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, good work, Nurudeen. And I think we established, Omar figured out that it's from, is that a Zelda fairy or something? Anyway, if that's the case, I love it. On to the next mysterious cave magical portal from Drakenseal. Drakenseal. Is this yours, Lampel? Yeah.
Drakenseal.
Drakenseal. Is that from something that I should know?
That I think that's how you have to say it.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Given the image, yeah. All right. You can take that one.
Let us know if you're here.
Agreed.
Hey, it's really awesome for you to do a free art critique. I have this render here aiming for a mysterious cave with a magical portal. But when making this, I ran into several issues I think I'm not experienced enough to fix myself. I planned for water underneath the portal, but it looks odd and one does not guess it's water. Additionally, I had a serious problem with RAM, as you can guess by the rock walls that have very low topology. Do you know a way that I could do to fix the RAM issues? I have 20 gigabytes at the moment. Additionally, I just think this scene feels empty. It has bright points and lots of contrast to lead the eye, but it is missing something. I tried having another dimension instead of the black area in the portal, but that distracted more than it helped to fill it up. Interesting. I would be really glad if you could help me out, as I often have the problem of empty feeling scenes or that something is off and I can't put my finger on it. And I feel like that's a pretty common feeling uh,
Yeah.
when working on an artwork, like, something is not quite right, but I'm not sure what. So I think the first thing to look at whenever something feels off, but it's really hard to tell what, the number one thing to check, I would say, is proportions. And I think that you're pretty darn close on like the scale of the different objects. But I would try just placing a human in the scene, whether that's a base mesh or like the Rigify armature, and scaling everything based on that. So whether that's the size of the steps or the cobblestones or the vines, just kind of move your human around the scene and measure it up against all these different pieces and make sure that everything fits. I think the depth of field kind of makes it seem a little bit off in the sense that it's like very heavy, and that could be just like a stylistic choice that you can add after the fact, but it does make the scene feel very like small in a way, because that's how the scene would have to be in order to get that in real life. So it kind of like makes it seem smaller than it is, which is interesting. Um, let's see. For the note about RAM, Kent, don't you think 20 gigabytes is like a lot of
I
RAM?
think that's more than enough. So yeah, I
I think
wondered.
I have 16. No, maybe I have 32. But still, like 20 is a lot.
Yeah, yeah, that should be plenty. I think my old computer, the Mac Pro, had 16, and for 5 years, like it was plenty. But yeah, 20. All that to say, 20 should be fine. So I wonder if they're using a lot of adaptive subdivision for like super detailed displacement. Because yeah, that shouldn't really be a problem. Someone mentioned, I think Lord Humongous mentioned that the to cope with the RAM issues, you could split into layers and composite later. But which I think that's a valid solution. But I feel like there's just an issue where something is taking way more memory than it needs to, than it should be. Um, so yeah, I feel like some troubleshooting in the scene would solve that. But yeah, to your point, like there is definitely something off about the scale. It kind of creeped up on me when I first saw it. Like I think it took some analysis to start to realize that the scale was off, and I feel like the steps compared to the like brick walkway sort of thing, brick
Hmm.
stone walkway, that feels different. Combined with the depth of field, it feels inconsistent to where it's either like a really small staircase, like just a few steps, like smaller than your average staircase. But I feel like the scene is epic in nature and it should be the opposite. If anything, it should feel like a bigger scene because it's a portal. I mean, come on, that's not going to be hidden away, in this tiny corridor. Um,
Or maybe it is. Maybe that's the interesting part about it.
maybe
It's
that
like you
is
just stumble up on it.
right, right. If yeah, okay. If that's the case, yeah. Well, I guess I'm trying to. Is that the thing that feels off? Was he going for big?
Oh, I
And
see.
yeah, I don't know though. I do agree that the water did not read like water to me. It read like some sort of magical sparks or glow something down there. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not even sure what's going on with the water enough to like diagnose it. I would guess that it's just way too displaced and it needs to be. Maybe there. Did he say? Is there like? It was the portal like creating a force field that's like churning the water or something. Maybe that.
I don't think so.
Okay, maybe if that's what's going on, I would maybe, since it's not reading that well, nix that and just go with like a calmer sort of pond or like body of water, I guess. I feel like that would be pretty easy to make look better. Um, and then you said you tried something in the portal, but I couldn't help but feel, for me, that there just wasn't that much of a purpose to the image, right? Like the portal by itself doesn't feel like enough of a reward. Like your eye is definitely drawn there, like you said. There's a lot of good elements that's directing the eye there. But when I stare at the portal, there's nothing to like reward that focus, I guess. And you said you tried a different dimension, which I agree. Like if there's just like if you just imagine taking a fully rendered lit scene and just placing it in the portal, that would look a little weird. But it could be like a shadowy version. You know, there could be like shadowy figures back there, or
Mm.
you know, like a something caught in silhouette that's more intriguing, but that rewards us for staring into the portal. That's what I feel like is missing for me. There's not enough purpose to this image. But like, I mean, taking a step back, like the quality of your rock surfaces are amazing. I think the brick path in general like is a wonderful amount of varied geometry and reflectivity and texture quality. So there's a lot of
Bricks look
really good
great.
stuff in this image. Yeah, that was kind of all I had.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, bricks look great. The fire looks really good.
Yeah.
Um, and so I have like a couple things that you could try just to see whether they work. So one of them is moving the chains a little bit away from the portal itself and kind of placing them more evenly around it, as if whoever made it knew that the portal was going to be there. So they kind of framed it with the chains. So maybe have them anchored outside the rock part of the circle and not so close. And that way it'll just feel like less cramped, or something about it just feels odd where they're intersecting with the wall at the same point that the like portal is, and just I don't know, something about that seems odd. Um, but you could either do that or have them like wrap completely around it. That would work too. But having them attach right where it's at feels a little bit iffy. Um, I can't tell whether the portal is like it's giving a pretty soft light to the rest of the scene, but I'm actually not sure where it is exactly. Um, Whether it's like in the wall itself or whether it's kind of out in front of the wall. And so maybe having something show where it is exactly would be good, because I would assume if it's right up against the wall that it would be lighting up that like inside crevice quite a bit, and it's not. So I'm not sure, maybe it's floating out in front, but if that's the case, it's really hard to see with the perspective. So I don't really know.
Yeah.
Um, and then you could try placing, just a small note, you could try placing the lightning crackles outside of the portal instead of on the inside, just because it looks, I don't know, horrible to walk through, or maybe that's the point. I don't know. That's just something that I thought of. You could try, um, for a note on the water, you only have like a very, very small portion of the scene that you can even see the water. So I think part of the problem is that we just can't even like see it to begin with. It's blocked. And we only get like a very tiny sliver of it. And it's hard to communicate just through that. So if you want to emphasize that, you could pull the path and the actual like um, ladder or the stairs back a bit and just have more water in the scene. And then you could just have the bridge or whatever that is be longer and stretch over it. And maybe an interesting thing that you could do is potentially take that little bridge and have it go through the portal, so the portal goes around it, and then you could still have it be like in outer space or something very like dark and subtle. But maybe the path on the other side is like frozen and like cracked away, or just has like as if it's been in a different environment that whole time. And that might be a way to like communicate that it's different without having it be like a super visually distracting like green field or something. Um, let's see. You could also try cracks or vines that like move away and spread out from the portal that kind of like bring everything kind of focused towards it, but give the impression that there's something in there that's like powerful or interesting. And yeah, I think that's all I had. Oh, you could also try sculpting the rocks a bit more. They seem very smooth and flat, so they have really good like texture detail, and they're very well like chiseled. But you could also just try sculpting them a bit more and giving them more form. But yeah, I think that is all the notes that I had.
Yeah.
Anything else that you would add to that?
I would affirm your note about like the texture shading quality on the rocks does look really good. I'm looking specifically at the left, the screen left, like cave wall. But then you can see that the silhouette is actually pretty smooth. So yeah, it's just a really, really high quality texture job, but like it would be nice to incorporate that into the geometry, which goes against like maybe he's not using adaptive subdivision, you know, like I'm
Oh
confused.
yeah.
But on the back wall, that does seem like a heavily bumped version, like not so detailed as the rest of the scene. So I agree with you. Like you were talking about the portal, kind of you're not sure where it is in space, and I kind of agree. Like if it's hanging from these chains, the right one is straight because it would be heavy surely, and so like it's pulling the chains taut and straight, and but the other one has a curve to it seemingly, and that doesn't. So it's like, is it attached to the wall? Is it hanging from these chains? I can't really tell, but anyway, yeah. So no, I think you got everything note wise. But yeah, I mean, someone said as soon as they saw this image that it's a dope scene, and I agree. It's a very, very intriguing scene you've got building up. So
It's super cool, and I like how it's different than a lot of like Portal ways of doing it.
mm-hmm, true.
Like there's a lot of different types of portals. Like obviously the game Portal has portals, but also like Doctor Strange and all of that. And this has a very different, like unique quality to it, which I like.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. There was a question completely off topic, but from Omar. Sometimes I want to rewatch an old tutorial to refresh some knowledge, but then I find out it's out of commission on CG Cookie, and there's no way to access the old library. Or you're asking if there's no way. We have to wait to for it to eventually be uploaded to YouTube. Can someone be bribed? Well, if Wes is in here, this is his time to speak up about bribery. But
Yeah, I,
I
I asked him in the chat which one in particular.
oh, okay, you already covered that. Awesome. All right then.
Yeah, we'll figure that out
Cool.
somehow.
Isn't dope? Dope scene, I think, is not an insult. It's quite the opposite. It's dope means cool, I believe.
As the kids are
Yeah,
saying.
that's right. As the kids say. All right. Next, we've got a quote creepy dude from. I'm getting the names messed up. That is not. I've been duplicating slides and I'm forgetting to update the names. Who did the creepy dude? Let me go find that real quick.
It's not Drakenseal. Oh, that was the
Yeah, it was the last
Magic
one.
Portal. Mm.
Let me find that really quick.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about this.
Everybody just take a minute to stare at that for a while.
Let's see. Close. All right. Yeah, we'll find it. I am seconds away from it. Seconds. All right, maybe a few more seconds. And we are there. Okay, so this is from Claytown Creations. I'm glad I got that because I think you're here, and I would not have known that. So Claytown Creations, you created this creepy dude. Let me read your description. This is a random one-off shot of a creepy dude I sculpted and textured. I eventually would like to either animate characters like this or turn them into game assets, but I'm having a tough time venturing into proper topology, UV unwrapping, rigging, etc. Do you have any advice for buckling down and putting time into learning these fun, creative aspects of the 3D world? I can't be there for the live stream, but I'll watch the recording later. And I see that you at least RSVP'd, so I think that you're here. I hope you are. Anyway, so yeah, this creepy dude character. I mean, I think that what I see in this is that you've got real skill with texturing, shading, rendering, and post-processing. I really like the wood floor. To me looks photorealistic, whether that's a photo scan texture or what. It looks really, really good. I like the overlay, the post-processing effect. I'm assuming that's what it is. That makes it look like an old photo, like dust and scratches on top. I think that works well here. It kind of makes me think of if this creature was like found in an attic and in the 70s and someone snapped a picture of it. Oh, you are here. Awesome. Hello, Claytown Creations. And so yeah, I think you've successfully created a creepy creature. If we get into the notes, and I'm going to talk about do you have advice for buckling down and learning the less fun aspects. As far as just critiquing this creature, again, like check on good lighting, check on good shading, check on good post-processing. If there's the main thing lacking, in my opinion, is a creature design part of it. Um, the shapes feel like they were created very fast, kind of like if you had this idea and you just kind of sketched it in 3D sort of feeling. Um, and so with that, there's a bit of a random feeling. You know, I can tell that there's an element of a human face involved. The obviously very, very human eyes, a human-ish nose, and then like a predator style mouth. So it does kind of feel a little bit random, which makes it feel creepy, and in that way you have succeeded, but it doesn't quite feel compelling. And if you're going to the next level, I think exercising and researching, studying like creature design aesthetics would help, and that would cross it over into a more compelling kind of place. And you know, granted, I think there are a lot of Blender artists out there not necessarily looking to be affirmed by the masses in their creature design ability, but they just have an idea in their head and they want to get it out in 3D. And in that's kind of what this feels like to me. And that's totally fine too. But I think there is some room for improvement in terms of creatures that are compelling, creature designs that are compelling. Now, as far as the how to do things, do you have advice for buckling down and putting time into learning the less fun, creative aspects of the 3D world? I would like Lepel to answer this too, but I would like to tell a story to answer this question. And it's when I first went to Disney World as an 11-year-old, and I've always been into drawing, and since I was kid, as early before I can even remember, according to my parents. And so I went to Disney World, also having an affinity for an appreciation for animated movies from Disney, and I went on their tour that I don't think is around anymore, but like where you could go into an animation studio and see animators. It was actually kind of weird. Like they were behind glass, and some people had a sign that's like, "I'm not a zoo animal." So it was a little awkward as an 11-year-old. But nevertheless, I got to be in person, like behind the scenes of how they make animated movies. And I was so excited about it, but left being very disappointed because I expected the process to be much more magical. But it was very tedious, hand drawing between like 12 and 24 frames per second by hand to create the illusion of drawings that moved. And I was really disappointed in that. And so we were, at Disney for like a week. And then when we came back in the airport, I remember thinking like, well, let me just give it a shot. Let me try. I'm going to get a flip book and I'm going to try and draw Beast from Beauty and the Beast, like roaring or walking. I can't remember what the action, but a very simple action. And so I started drawing. I got up to like 20 drawings. I flipped it for the first time and he kind of moved. And that was enough for me to turn my entire mind around towards animation. And that was hand drawn specifically. But I was like, the result, the final result was worth the tediousness that really disappointed me in the beginning. And then I went home and I started using the busted workflow of Microsoft Paint to try and create a 2D, hand-drawn type animation thing. All that to say that for me, the excitement and satisfaction of the end result must make the tedious tasks worth doing, and even you might find that they end up being enjoyable. That is without a doubt a fundamental requirement for me, and always is for computer graphics. In my case, like the final result, whether it's a video game, whether it's a short film, whether it can just be like a fully rendered character. Like there's varying stages of what the final result means to you and your projects, but that has to be worth all the tedious tasks. If it is, you'll do the tedious tasks. They won't be that bad, and it'll be worth it in the end. But that's my big answer to that. Lampel, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great story. I don't know if we've talked about this, but when I was a kid, I also used Microsoft Paint and Windows Movie Maker to make little animations.
What? That's
And
exactly what I did. We got to
yeah,
talk.
I have gone back and tried to find them, but I can't, which is probably okay because they were god awful. But that's not the point. The point is that it's definitely like when you see the end result, then you're like, oh, like I made this. This is really cool. But you talk about it as like the less creative parts of it, and I would agree that it's more like Kent said, like a little more tedious, a little more like you have to be more like thoughtful as you go through it and like systematic. But doing those things is what allows you to make the end result more creative, in the sense that like rigging is an incredibly tedious process. Like it's one of the most tedious that you can have in 3D. But if you give an animator a rig that's not well made, he's not going to be very creative with it in the sense that it's going to severely limit what he can possibly do. And the same thing goes with topology and anatomy and all of those different more complex topics, is that having an understanding of that is what gives you more building blocks to be creative in the future. So, for example, with this image, like if you really went through and took more time to like make a very realistic spider and make like a really realistic human face and a really realistic, something else. Not that everything has to be realistic, but that at least gives you something believable and to shoot for in terms of like the structure of things. And then you combine what you've learned through those and made a little creature, that would be even more horrifying because it comes with so much of the building blocks that you now have. Yeah. Would you agree with that,
No,
Ken?
I think it's a really good word. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I completely agree. And someone mentioned that I saw Omar say that it's all about the end result, and someone said they disagree. I assume the disagreement was about like it's about the journey too, and I agree. Like my end result is what makes me go on the journey, but the journey is a reward in and of itself. Even projects that I don't end up finishing, I can look back at the things I learned, and it's not completely lost. But if I didn't have the end result, I would never be on the journey in the first place. If I didn't have that in my aspirations, I guess. Anyway. Good conversation. Yeah, good stuff. Matthew Ulray is here. By the way, I met Matthew last week. He stopped by my hometown, and we had some coffee, and we nerded out big time. So Matthew met someone in person. Yeah. All right, next one. An anime interior by Anna Sofaz. You can take that one away, Pal.
Yeah. Hello. I'm trying to replicate a picture by Arsenic. Mainly, I'm trying to make an anime style with minimum post-processing in a painting program. Any critiques and comments are appreciated. So this is a really cool picture, and there's also a clay render that goes with it and the original image. So there's a lot to base it off of. And you've done a really good job with modeling and texturing. Like these things look quite good. And it's very, very close to the original painting, which I think is awesome. I really like the colors that you've used. I think that really pops out. And the original as well is super colorful, even maybe a tad more so. I think that's really what gives it a lot of like life and style. I think the one thing that's hurting this is the resolution and whether it's like the lack of anti-aliasing in the freestyle lines that you're using, or it just simply needs to be a larger photo. If it's 1080p, maybe bump it up even more. But there's just so much aliasing going on that it's kind of distracting, and it kind of it outlines things in a weird way. So I know you have the freestyle lines, but yeah, it just seems kind of like choppy. And also, you'll notice in the original that even though the original feels extremely like has the anime cartoon style, they don't actually have outlines very much at all. It's almost completely without. And so I would challenge you to try to do that first before going and outlining everything, and try to get that style mostly with the lighting, the shape of things, which you already have, and that sort of thing. So you could also try to match the dimensions. That would be a challenge to do, and I think it would be worth doing. Is trying to match the dimensions of the original house to yours. And so since the original was painted, it's not necessarily going to be 100% replicatable, but I think that you could get quite a bit closer in that. And I think that would help with things like the table being in the right spot and smaller things like that. But that would be more of a minor detail, but I think it would be worth doing as an exercise, just to see the different relationships between things. Because you'll notice some of the pipes are different like thicknesses and lengths, then you have them in smaller things like that. But when all added together, it definitely starts to make a difference.
Yeah.
Um, Beyond that, something else outside of the second window above the kitchen counter, I think would help, just to
Oh, good
show that that
point.
is a window and that there's like light coming from it. Right now, it doesn't really seem like there's light coming from it. It's just that whole wall is very, very flat. Whereas in the original, it's has a lot of like blue tint to it. There's a lot of color, and the color sort of like fades as you get out from the center there. So there's a lot more going on than just the simple like tile texture. But yeah, there's also obviously like way more objects, but that just simply takes more time. Um, I would try to get the other stuff first before adding the rest of the objects, but before you call it complete, I think it would be worth adding some of that like chaos into there to give it a little bit more character. Um, but yeah, what do you think, Kent?
Yeah, I think those are really good notes. I never realized that the window above in the recreation render, there's absolutely nothing in that window in the kitchen. But yeah, there's a whole scene, in the original that's outside that window. Um, yeah, the windows to me seems like the world outside is very flat, like a flat plane with a texture on it. I don't know if that's what's happening in the scene, but it's just the feeling. And in the original, since we have the original and it seems to be so close, I hope you're expecting to get critiqued judging by the original, but the in the original there's actually like an overhang kind of porch roof outside the right window, and that helps to add depth, I think, to the world. Whereas
Hmm.
yours is lacking that, and so it just feels like take a couple steps out, and then it's a brick wall with a painting of a exterior kind of right outside the door. Um, yeah, I'm kind of caught in the middle with the aliasing and not aliasing. Like some objects really feel like aliasing, and others don't. It's kind of this really weird in between. Regardless, it's definitely a lot more aliased and like black outlined than the original. The original has this wonderful softness to everything. But yeah, I think you hit pretty much everything on the head, every nail on the head. So that was a good critique. Um, and it,
Nice. I'd also try cranking the lights up a little bit. You'll notice that in the painting it's kind of like blown out. But there's also a very like soft glow coming from outside of that. So if cranking up the lights doesn't like achieve that with just the natural bounces, then having like a second light kind of inside the window there, whether that's an area light or something, just to give that like glow
yeah,
as it reflects off the floor, would be
definitely,
excellent.
definitely. Um, there was a good suggestion to use Blam, which I think I forgot what that stands for, but it like is specifically designed as an add-on to help with aligning your 3D scene to footage or an image. So that'd be a
Yeah,
good
that could be
option.
good.
Yeah.
And William mentioned that it's now called F-Spy. I guess I haven't used the new version of it, so I
Oh,
can't say how
that's a
it
big
works,
difference.
but
F
I've
Spy.
heard good things about it.
All right, that's good to know. F Spy. Curious. All right, next. Orc character by Ryan King, and I believe Ryan is here. So if you are, say hello, um, and I'll read your description. Here's an orc character that I sculpted in Blender. I'd love to hear any critique or feedback you might have for me. All right, so yeah, definitely an orc character. Um, it's the good things about it, I think, are the level of. So let me get into the notes. I guess I'll go over the good things too. The big note overall that I would give is the refined shapes and details, refining the shapes and details a little bit more. You've got the building blocks there, but there's room to perfect them, I guess, is the spirit behind that note. So when talking about the anatomy specifically, there's the.
Ryan is here.
Oh, Ryan, you are here. Hello. Good to see you, sir.
What's up?
Um, so like the types of detail that I see in a scene like this is like the number of objects, which you are doing really well. Like you've got separate belts, separate belt buckles, a knife, a little like strap for the knife to attach to the belt. You've got like an axe or whatever weapon that is. You've got separate leg kind of shield pieces, or not shield, but like armor pieces. So the number of objects you have in the scene, I think, is good, and it's establishing a good level of detail. Compare that to like game art, where you can sometimes crunch all of that detail down into a single object through like normal maps and stuff, and it kind of ruins the illusion. Having them as separate objects is good because you get ambient occlusion from them, you get light interaction. Anyway, the number of objects is good, but the detail per object is a little lacking. So let's take, for example, the anatomy, the underlying body and torso. The pecs, to me, are massive, like suggesting that this guy is muscular. He's an orc, he's fighting a lot of battles and building up that muscle. But then everywhere else, from the abdomen to the arms, it loses the muscle definition almost entirely. Some of it is suggested, and you can see a little bit of shading, to start to suggest a little bit of a bicep, a little bit of abs. There's a little bit of shading, and then you get to the pecs, and it's like razor sharp muscle definition. And so, kind of similar to how we talked earlier to a sculpture critique, is making sure that detail is consistent. Either reduce the pecs so that the overall character is less muscular, or increase the musculature so that all of it's appropriately defined and toned. That is lacking to me. The dents and kind of scars, since you also have them in the body piece, but like these little scar looking divots and stuff, you can see them also in the armor pieces. To me, it's a good idea to have that kind of detail, but it's very half baked right now. Like it's one stroke and then you left it. Whereas like that can be refined and perfected to either read clearly as scratches or clearly as dings. Some of them are very side by side and parallel, and so I guess it kind of gives this impression of being very work in progress and not finished, not refined. There's some proportional issues. I think the head is a bit too big, kind of takes him into like a slightly cartoony proportion. The arms, I believe, are too short, so they can be lengthened a little bit. They feel scrawny, especially this one on the left, like that lower forearm and hand just feel really tiny. So yeah, I've talked about the quantity of objects, but yeah, so like this feels like a very good work in progress orc that can be refined and detailed to a really high level, fix some proportional issues. But yeah, it's a really good starting kind of position for it. What if it were literally half baked? Do you have any notes, Lampel?
Only adding to what you said, I think the arms that did stand out to me as too short, especially once you mentioned that where like the elbows on his are like kind of by his upper ribs, whereas if you put your elbows by your sides, it's like just a little bit above your pelvis a bit, or your hips. So lengthening that, and like the curve of like the back of the head seems off for some reason, or just like the overall shape of the skull itself.
Yeah.
Feels mushy in a way, or like too oblong.
Definitely. I see what you
Can't quite put my finger on it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know if we can see it in the camera, probably not. Let me see. But like I think the head needs to come down and then cut inward, and then the neck starts. Whereas now the whole back of the head just slopes right down into the neck.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Yeah. The only other thing that I would mention is the belt and like pieces of like leather. Right now it does very much look like wet clay, in that like when he raises his leg, it like gets pushed up, but not in a way as if it was like a thick piece of leather. It's kind of just like being mushed upwards.
Yeah.
Like it's very, very soft and like gooey. Yeah, so I think the whole thing would have to be pushed up his hip and not have it go back downwards on the other side, or maybe just not have it move at all.
Mm-hmm. Maybe have it like, if this is the belt, like it kind of, the bottom edge kind of flips out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean. That's a really good description, is that it feels like sculpey clay right now, which the rendering is making us think that too, but the mushiness of it definitely is, and that's not really the goal. You know, you don't want it to read like clay. You want it to read, I don't know, like a real orc. Like this is really a hard surface. It's really leather, and right now it's not quite reading that way.
Yeah, like the shoulder piece is definitely feels very like hard
Yeah, agreed.
and solid.
Yeah, the shoulder piece actually looks
Um,
really good.
yeah,
Um, but anyway, all right. Well, thank
nice
you.
work.
Yeah, keep up the good work. Let's see who is that. Ryan King. Yeah, you're here. Thank you for saying hello and thanks for submitting. And next, the Hinkley T34 by Prim Rastogi.
This was my latest project that I worked on. Goal number 1 was to create realistic materials. Number 2, to improve my modeling skills. I found out that the materials were not that close to realism. How can I improve my materials, and how can I set the scene without spending a lot of time on it? That is pretty tricky because pretty much whatever background you have is going to be at least somewhat time intensive. You could try putting this in the water, but that comes with its whole host of challenges, especially if it's moving, because just putting it in like a little like ocean modifier or whatever doesn't have any like interaction with the sides. It's not going to create any like little foam or ripples. So it'd be quite a lot of work, basically no matter where you put it. You could try putting it on the back of like a truck or something, or sitting in a shipyard. But I can't really think of a way to add a background without it taking a lot of time. In terms of modeling, I think it looks quite good. I think there's only a few parts where it looks a bit soft, or like it looks a little bit too rounded. For example, the very front part, all of the creases there with the subdivision surface are just a bit too smooth. So again, it takes the whole boat and makes it feel very, very small. Things this is very similar with the little like flag thing on the left that also has the appearance of being very small. So I think sharpening things up a bit would help with that. In terms of materials, I'm not entirely sure quite yet. Kent, what do you think about material-wise? I think the material on the bottom, like blue part, looks quite good.
I think so too. I think it has this very subtle kind of stretched noise breakup in the blue material that I think is good. I think that this kind of model, it could be very easy to throw like plain glossy, plastic type materials on it, and then not know what to do with it. Like you don't want to make it look grimy and gross, but then what else do you do to increase the detail level? So I think really subtle textures like that is a good way to do that. I think context, it will help a lot. Like Lampel, you said, put it in some water, or that's going to be a lot. Well, the water, I mean, if it's just sitting in the water, making it move and waves and splash and stuff, that is not going to be easy. But like if it's just sitting in a still water, like that shouldn't be too hard, and it should help we have reflections from the water that would shine up on the boat hull itself. Having like a sky in the background, I think would help. But yeah, so it's hard to give real like clear notes on how to improve the material without a context. As far as the modeling, I agree that the softness kind of makes it feel a little like a toy rather than like a big boat. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to. I agree that it's hard to give explicit notes on materials without the bigger context around the boat. But it doesn't look bad. But I can understand it feeling like it's not quite photorealistic.
Yeah, I think the top like white portion to me, it kind of stands out as like porcelain in a way.
Oh yeah,
Like
definitely.
it looks like a sink kind of material.
Looks like
Um,
yeah, like the seat part of a toilet a little bit to me.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Hmm.
So part of that does come from the smooth modeling,
Hmm.
I think, just because they usually have that kind of characteristic. Um, but giving it a little more treatment similar to the bottom part of the boat, I think would help to sell it as Actually, I don't know what the outside of a boat is made out of.
I'm starting to look up an image now of the Hinckley T34 because I'm wondering if there can be a lot more details added to the surface.
That would definitely help with the sense of scale.
Yes, and I think that is true. Let's see. Open link in new, open image, new tab. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of room for like those little hatches and little like buckles kind of things. I think that there's a lot more fine detail that is present in this particular boat that is not present in the model currently. I mean, it would also help maybe to see from the backside, just looking at this photograph. The backside, you can see the interior more, and there's a lot more area for detail, which you wouldn't get in like a toy necessarily. So, from this particular angle, I think that's maybe your biggest disservice right now. This particular angle lacking the details and lacking a context. Um, but I mean, I think the building blocks are good, and you just can push it further.
Yeah, I think so.
Um, cool.
Also, yeah, adding like a little bit of those like trim details seems to help a lot, at least in the
Yes.
photos that I'm looking at,
Mm-hmm.
and adding more like screws and panels where they are needed.
Agreed. 100%. Yeah. Nice. It's a fun model, though. I mean, perfect for like subdivision surface, like learning how to model subdivision surface.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like summer out, feels good.
It's a good
I
theme.
like it.
There you go. Awesome. The next one, I think we only have a couple more. Um, this is the work in progress for the realistic character course from number 9, and I believe number 9 is here. Hello, number 9. So I'll read your description. It's exactly what I said. Uploaded for the. This is my first attempt at making a realistic character sculpt. I was pretty nervous about it, but I like how it's turned out so far. Lots of things to improve, but I'm mostly interested in the arms, especially the forearms, which kind of turned into a blobby mess. Anatomy gets kind of tricky here and there. I agree that I still struggle with the arm. Let's see. Yeah, the arm and this connection and how the muscles connect here. I typically do it on men because like they're more defined, and so the more definition, the easier it is to kind of analyze what to do. But with women, it's a little more difficult. It's not always quite as defined, and so I feel like that's probably what you're running into here with the arms. Like there's also this kind of hyperextension feeling to it. If I can get my arm in camera, it's like this sort of thing. I don't know if you can, yeah, like this, where it's kind of bending backwards, which feels very uncomfortable. I think to look at, but also to like do physically. So I would like ease it into a bend, like give it a little bit of a bend because you don't really want your character in like stiff position for modeling. Like ultimately it'll be I guess ideally it will be rigged and turned into an animatable character, and you want a more relaxed pose. So I think to add that into the arms and also to like the hands, make sure they're not stretched out completely flat, which yours aren't, but like I know a lot of people like to just put them out completely flat. I recommend like loosening it up a little bit like that. Okay, so yeah, the arms and the definition in the arms, it's hard because I can't tell you do this, this, and this, and then it'll be fine. Like I don't have a systematic process, but getting like researching that part of women's arms will help a lot, and just get different lighting scenarios so that you see the shapes based on different lighting. Sometimes it can be hard if you get like a really overcast like light flooding that scene and there's not explicit shadows and things like that. It can be hard to analyze what the shape is. But yeah, it does feel flat on the front side of the arm. Like there needs to be a little more roundedness to the front. Right now yours seems really flat. So I mean that at least will help. That's one, I guess, explicit thing. But I had some other notes. I think there's some proportions that can be adjusted, and namely the hands and feet. They feel a little too small, and also I think the legs can be a little longer. So here's a before. Wait, let me see. Before, this is your current version, and then I just in Krita kind of scaled them up a little bit, so the legs are slightly lengthened. The maybe actually made this one a little bit too big. This hand, but also the perspective is a little off. So is a little extreme, I guess. So yeah, I would play around with those proportional changes. I think that will help. And then a same note with the collarbone. It's a hard area to get right. Like the collarbone, you've got the functional building blocks of the anatomy there, but I think it can be more refined and look a little better. So yeah, spending time on that area is definitely, it's still hard for me to sculpt that completely correct. But other than that, like there's not really a whole lot to say. Like I really like the midsection. I think this, really the whole torso, I think looks pretty good. But the midsection especially reads very organic, very human. It's not, a lot of times you see these areas like squared off, but it's got a great roundness to it. The fleshiness in the legs feels very good, very human. Number 9, you have a question. Could you check the face too? That's in the project file. Oh no, you gave me a project file. I was not prepared.
She links to like a close up down below. Let me see how far down that is.
Let's see. Oh, here we go. I got it.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you meant the blend file. But okay, yeah. Oh wow. Wow, the face looks really good. It's funny, like the face, the lit version, I did not really connect it to looking like this. It looks really good. I'm trying to think, are there any notes on the face? Well, yeah, this looks like a different face. I wonder if they are different versions, but this face right here, focused on the face, looks quite refined. I think it's very believable. Yeah, the shapes are there and they're working really well. Oh, the collarbone, maybe that's also been upgraded. That does seem to be upgraded. And that does look better. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Huh. So I wonder if this is a kind of work in progress thread. That must be what it is. Huh.
I like the different ideas at the bottom, just like
Oh, cool.
outfit or like styles. That's super cool.
I
It's a
love
great
that
way to do it.
Yes, absolutely. That's a really clever way to get your ideas out quickly. Wow, you're doing a lot of good work on this. Kudos. Really taking it serious, and it's showing. Like it's a lot of work you're putting in, and it's going to pay off. It already is paying off. Really nice work.
Yeah. Wow.
Awesome. All right. Next one. I'm messing up the names like crazy. So this is like an Egyptian scene. It's not the boat we just looked at. But I think I got the name right, maybe. Yeah.
Mafa?
Mafa. Got the name right, or got the artist right, the name of the work wrong. Lampo, you can take this one away.
All right, this was made for competition that had the theme historic. I wanted it to be the pyramid when they were new about 4,500 years ago. I did not win, but I would like to know what I can do to improve the image so I could use it in my portfolio. And first of all, I think this is a pretty portfolio-worthy piece. Like, I really like all the details on the sand. The scorpion itself looks pretty awesome. I'm very thankful to live in a part of the world that does not have scorpions, so I can't tell you from personal experience what they look or act like, but I imagine they look like that. So I think that looks really good, and all of the different grains of sand look really cool. And I also like the heat distortion effect, and mixed with the like depth of field, I think that just looks unique and cool. You can tell that there's people walking and there's palm trees. All in all, it's really nice. I think that you could potentially move the scorpion over to the other side, just to help things flow a little bit better. Maybe you tried that already, but it just seems like everything's kind of like cramped over to the right, and there's tons of space to the left, which is good to have a good amount of negative space, but it just seems off balance in general. But the lighting seems quite good. You could have a little more of those little like patches. So beneath the scorpion, you have those little like tiny things of sand that are sticking out on top. And that really helps give it more form and make it seem less like just a flat surface. So maybe a little bit more of those everywhere, or some footsteps or something. But I don't have too much to add. Like, it's a very simple scene, and each individual piece of it is done well. perhaps you could crop it like a little closer to the scorpion or emphasize him a little bit more. But yeah, what do you think, Kent?
I never put together that that would have been heat distortion on the pyramids. That was actually bothering me because I was like, there's something weird happening with the depth of field. I don't know if it's like too many, octagonal bokeh shapes that's like giving this kind of pixelated, almost like you pixelated a small image and scaled it way up. And
Uh-huh.
like that's kind of what it read to me as. But I'm looking at it differently now, thinking of it as heat distortion. Um, but yeah, to me, there was something odd about the depth of field.
Okay.
But I don't know. Maybe that is heat distortion. It makes it look like to me that the pyramids are very, very jagged. Not smooth sided, and so when it's blurred, it kind of has that jagged feel. But I don't know. Maybe it is heat distortion. Anyway, um, I feel like there might be a subtle scale issue between the sand and the scorpion because scorpions I know are pretty small, but I feel like the sand would still be smaller in this scene in order for this to make complete sense. It feels more like really tiny pebbles because to see grains of sand that defined, is really really close up to sand. Um,
You could also just scale up the scorpion.
that was going to be my suggestion. Yeah, because that would also, I think, solve the scale issue, but draw more attention to where the at least depth of field suggests the attention should be. Because most of the screen is the background in the pyramids, which is great, but I can't make any detail out. I can't like really pay attention to those because they're blurred, and depth of field usually draws attention to what's not blurred typically. So yeah, I would say increase the size of the scorpion and let that take up more focus and be more focus in the shot. Um, but yeah, I mean, I love again. This is an example of like really good building blocks. Like taking something from a 9 to a 10 is what this qualifies as, in my opinion. It's really really good work. I love the
I think
detail.
so.
I love the
I really
detail
like
of
it.
the footsteps of the scorpion like in the sand. I think that's nice. Um,
Yeah, you could try if you did scale up the scorpion and kind of like flip him to the other side, angling the camera so that he's overlapping part of the pyramids or something.
yeah.
Um, just so that they're less like multiple points of like focus
Mhm.
because they are pretty dominant. And so if you just have like the scorpion isolated over here and the pyramids kind of isolated over here, I think it would be a little bit like disconnected. So maybe just kind of angling it so that maybe his tail comes up and over the sand dune and just as many like layers as you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. I agree with that. I actually like your word dominant. That is a good word to describe the background. Whereas like if you're gonna blur out the pyramids that much, you're probably only trying to convey like, hey, this is a desert in Egypt. Like you just want it to
Hmm.
be set in Egypt, and you don't need that much of the frame to establish that. So yeah, I agree. Like turning the camera down, giving less focus, including them certainly, but giving them less focus and screen space. I think that's a good note.
And I really like the people walking. Like it's just blurred out enough that you can't really like see them, but you can tell that it's people. And I don't know. I like it. It's a cool effect.
I'm still looking for the people. Is this on the left side, directly in front of the left pyramid? Does that read like people like taking photographs kind of thing?
And I was looking at the like blobs on the right that are kind of upright.
Oh, the big blobs.
Yeah, to me that looks like people.
Okay. I guess I thought there was some sort of like my brain registered that they would just be trees, but
Oh,
again,
one of them kind of looks like a tree. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it is.
but clarifying this, maybe I would suggest maybe removing the heat distortion effect if that's what it is, and letting it because it's also kind of like this sunset appearance, which it gets really cold at night in a desert, right? So like once the sun starts going down, I imagine it's not like the heat of the day where there would be a lot of distortion. Um, but yeah, it's just kind of making the background less clear, I guess. Um, anyway, good notes. Really, really cool scene. And yeah, someone mentioned that the SSS subsurface scatter on the Scorpion is top notch. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I think the Scorpion is amazing. So like, it needs more screen space so we can appreciate that detail. So Yeah, good stuff.
Nice work.
Next. All right, this is our last one, I believe. Um, this is the textured pilot. So you should recognize the character from the course Jonathan Williamson did about intro to character modeling. This is the character from that course. And this is a textured version. Looks really, really cool. Let me read what Texas Petillo said. With this model, I wanted to produce the best cartoonish, stylized anatomy I could. Based on the course from Jonathan Williamson, I tried to make a good-looking render for my portfolio. In this case, I think that for the project, it would be interesting to make another style instead of the manga style proposed in the course. In that way, I could improve my skills on toon details, particularly the eye shapes, hands, and ears, produce a stylish, cartoonish character that people could see and don't go like, it's looking good, but there's something wrong with this and that. Something that could have the correct anatomy related to the style I choose. Important, when I was doing the boots and when I applied it, I noticed that one of the boots gets some weird sculpt error, but to me that looks like something different, disrupting that feels some history behind the boot. Maybe a dog destroyed it, maybe airplane crashed, we don't know. Add some story to it. I decided to keep the imperfection, but maybe that wasn't the right decision. Well, first of all, this made our staff top picks, I believe. Like we saw this made its way around our community chat. Like, hey, check out what one of our members did. So yeah, we were big fans of this image. It was the first time we really saw someone take the hair and do what you did with it, which is a really unique take, and it's really well executed. And the model overall is really well done. So yeah, this one we staff picked it. So congrats. You know we're fans of this, and so therefore, like, there's not a lot of notes, honestly, that I came up with. I do think the scarf is a bit droopy, which I know from that course it was simulated. So you know, you modeled the scarf basic shapes, and then you let Blender like simulate cloth, and that can definitely be tough to get any sort of like tightness into a cloth simulation, because that just gets more difficult when you try and do that. And so you get a scarf that looks droopy, kind of wet, kind of rubbery, I guess. And typically scarves are a little more tight, I would say. Not that it needs to be like, you know, choking him or anything, but it just feels a little too loose, a little too rounded on like the corners, for example. The wrinkles aren't as strong as they could be. So I feel like the scarf could use a little love, but it doesn't look that bad. I mean, I'm kind of nitpicking, but the lighting to me also is a little more on the flat side. It's not bad by any means, but I feel like there could be a little more depth involved. You know, I say my preference. I like to always try and make it feel as far from flat as possible, but I also, if this was a character in one of my kids' TV shows, I wouldn't question it at all. Like it looks like that high quality. But for me, I feel like there could be a little more depth in the render. And then you mentioned the boot, and you know, I can only see it so close, but I think it does look like a render error, not a render error, a sculpt error, and I'm not really sure how that would have happened, but at this distance from camera, I think it's fine. But if we're any closer, I think it would kind of be annoying. It would be a visual issue, but you know, from this angle, it's fine. And I'm curious what happened, what caused that, honestly, because I don't really run into that very often. But yeah, I mean, it's a great render. It's a really, really excellent character. So I was just looking for things to nitpick. Lampel, do you have anything?
I have very few things to nitpick. Like it looks really good. Like the first thing that struck me is that it just has so much life, especially in the face. I think that's what a lot of characters are missing.
Yeah.
So you've definitely nailed like the most important parts of character design and like making it look good. I think it's awesome. I think if you really wanted to like push it even a little bit farther, you could maybe do a little bit more texturing on the boots and the like jacket as well. The jacket feels like super, super soft and almost like fuzzy in a way, which is, I mean, it looks extremely comfortable. But for like a pilot's jacket, maybe it could be a little bit more like leathery-ish. If you wanted to like really go extra, you could put some like wool on the like inside coating. That would look pretty awesome. Um, but yeah, I think it looks really cool.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't know what else to say.
Right, it's really good. You Tex. I hope I'm saying that right. I get like TX for Texas Patillo is kind of how I'm reading that, but I'll just call you TX. You said when you applied the mirror modifier that happened. So I wonder how you did that. Maybe would you have put the multi-res sculpting first and then the mirror modifier after that, and then applied it? Maybe applied it in the wrong order. I wonder.
Ooh,
I wonder if that's what
could
happened.
be.
But anyway, curious. Let's see. I think that's about it. Yeah, that is the last critique, I believe.
I guess you could also look at some of the wrinkles on the jacket. Like most of them are quite good, but around the elbows, um,
They don't make
the
as much
folds
sense.
seem a little bit off.
That's true. Usually, a lot of wrinkles are concentrated horizontally. Let's see, horizontally, like going like this. Um, whereas, yeah, I agree with that note. That's a good one. All right, cool. Well, that's it for the critiques. So, thank you guys for submitting, and we will definitely do this again. We do them fairly regularly for our members, but I'm sure we'll open it up and do a free one at some point. But this was a special occasion for you guys, so thank you for submitting. This was a lot of fun. I hope there was some valuable information you got from the critiques. And yes, so Omar, officially we're done. So goodbye. But I'm going to talk to Omar because we're trying to get a community supported render farm situation up and running for him. So we're going to try and talk through some of the details. So yeah, that's it for the stream. Now I'm just talking with Omar for a few minutes. Omar, so let me read your questions. You got a bunch.
See you guys later.
Yeah. Oh, see you
I
later.
mean, I'll stay on,
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm just
Yeah, saying goodbye. How much gigabytes should be enough in Dropbox in your experience for the rendering thing? So in my experience, and if anyone's staying and wants to offer insight, so Omar he's rendering a demo reel right now, and he's got really detailed, beautiful scenes, but not the resources to like render them, quickly. And so we're trying to help him out, and we'll like I'll render some frames, maybe Lampel render some frames, and anyone else in the community that wants to. And so we're trying to figure out a system to make that as efficient as possible. And I mentioned Dropbox, and then I went and because I've had a big Dropbox for so many years, I kind of forgot like what the free account was, and I checked today, and it was only 2 gigabytes. And I do not think that that's going to be enough for rendering, especially. You could share a project file, situation out, but to be able to transfer, I mean, it's going to be gigabytes and gigabytes. If you remember the Halloween project that we did with Melvin, that was like 25 gigabytes for just that one scene, just the raw render files. Therefore, that's not going to be enough, obviously. So the more we talk about Dropbox or a cloud syncing file service, I think our better option is going to be Google Drive. And if you have a Gmail account, you should have access to free 15 gigabytes of Google Drive. And it essentially functions the same. We can sync the data. And so what that would look like, Omar, is like you share out a folder between me, you, and anyone else who wants to join, and we all like that file directory gets duplicated and synced through everyone. So if I create a file, save it, you all will get that in a matter of time, like a very short amount of time. So for rendering, we can all literally open the same .blend file, hit render. As long as that placeholders option is enabled, we all start rendering, and Dropbox sees there's a placeholder for that file, so I'll render the next frame, and then it will fill up dynamically. It's very simple if we all have enough storage, and we're all syncing that directory. But if that is either not enough space or people don't want to do Google Drive, the manual option is like you just share the .blend file, you pack all the textures in it, you set it up for rendering where we literally just have to open the file, hit render, and then depending on how many people help you, we just we divide that number of frames between all of us. And that's very we don't have to worry about the syncing or signing up for Dropbox or anything. And then once we have the files, the only tricky thing is going to be how to transfer gigabytes of image files back to you. I mean, if it's enough people, maybe it'll only be like a gigabyte. We upload to an FTP server somewhere, or it's pretty easy to transfer files that way. So yeah, that's kind of my thought on how we can go about it. Let me read through your question specifically. Am I the only one who freaks out when you have 2,000 frames on a timeline and thinks, Jesus, that's 2,000 renders I have to make? Or is that actually not that much in a typical number of renders for an animation? Those are typical numbers, but the fact remains,
it's also a lot.
That's a lot. Exactly. That's a ton of space. It's a lot of time, and that's why we're trying to do this together. That's going to make it plausible. And let's see, what's all that cloud service farm that Dennis has? So Dennis created Barista, and we can go check that out. Dennis works for us, and let's see, Barista Blender Market. So the Barista Blender Market add-on is a tool that allows you to tap into Amazon AWS. So Amazon, massive, huge company. They have server upon server upon server, like probably hundreds of thousands of servers that they make available to people to use. And so he created an add-on that deploys Blender to those servers, and you can render using Amazon stuff. So it's a big, powerful service, and this is, as far as I know, the first add-on that lets Blender tap into that for the sake of rendering. And so has a ton of potential. It's definitely worth looking into. You know, it's $90. It's one-time purchase for the add-on, but there is AWS services that you have to pay for too, depending on how much you use the servers. But compared to like a render farm, it can be extremely cheap for the same kind of rendering compared to like a Render Street or similar render farm service. So that's what that is, and it would be a good option if you're prepared to spend some money. But I was kind of expecting this to be free, like community driven. Just like while I'm sleeping and my computer's doing nothing, I'll be happy to render frames for you and anyone else who wants to do that as well. Let me see if you have any other questions. Does anything does that make sense, Omar, a little bit more about how we would approach it? So, yeah, I haven't seen anything else from you. Thank you for everyone who pieced out and watched the stream. There's some people were thanking us, Lampel, so that's good.
Nice. That was helpful.
Omar is thinking, according to the emote. But yeah, I mean, I think this is totally doable, regardless of if we go the route where we manually render and we don't sync through Google Drive. You would just have to be optimal about how you organize the frames, make sure people aren't, rendering duplicates.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, if that makes sense, Omar, over the next few days, I'm going to keep an eye on your thread. There are other questions below. I missed those. What's all about? Okay, I talked about Dennis. Okay. Should I render the passes in TIFF 16-bit to have compositing wiggle room? That's going to increase your file size. I personally, no, I guess if I want to do compositing, I will render in EXR. And yeah, I think I probably do that in 16-bit. That'll just mean that it'll definitely be gigabytes and gigabytes of render files. If you can, it would be ideal if you render your composited version out. So like, you kind of do your test rendering on your own and you do the compositing. And when you do the final render output, you have that check to do the composite nodes as well. That way you're getting out like final PNGs of your composite. But yeah, the difficulty with the 16-bit is how we are all going to transfer that much data back to you for free. Is being the key. So then what else did you say? Are the files that Blender outputs directly uploaded to the internet, or should they be saved in each person's local computer and then uploaded? If we're doing the Dropbox or Google Drive way, we can treat it like it's a local file because it's local and it's in the cloud. Does that make sense? Like that's what the syncing means. So like I can just render the file straight to my local drive as long as that's the Dropbox/Google Drive, and it will upload automatically. So yeah, I think I've answered your question so far. But I guess the only thing to say is right now, you and I can kind of figure it out, maybe just us. And then once we have a system down, we can pass that on to everybody else. Like once we know exactly how it will work. So yeah, for the next couple of days, I'll be happy to work that out with you through the community thread. Maybe if we need to hop on like a Skype call or something. But is there anything else? Yeah, what we need from you is going to be a ready to render file to where we open up the file and we click render. That's essentially all that the people will need to do. Okay, I have a nice idea on how it can be pulled off. Excellent. Well, I'm excited for you, man. I think it'll be a fun little community bonding experience, and hopefully you'll get a little nicer render quality on your demo reel assets. All right. Well, with that said, I mean, yeah, I'll check back in with the community thread, and we'll continue communication through there. I'll try and keep a close eye on it and work it out with you, my man. All right, that's it.
Good luck.
Yeah, definitely good luck. Lampel, I'll probably ask if once we get to that point if we can use your computer if it's available. But
yeah, sure.
I'm sure CG Cookie people would be happy. I've asked them for that in the past, and it's been fine. So I'm sure it'll be good. You'll have some people to help. So yeah, we'll let you go now. And have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
See ya.